Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and today I want to try something a little bit different. With King in Black having recently come out and you guys going absolutely nuts over that video, I thought it'd be a good time to go over pretty much all the symbiotes in the Marvel Universe, as well as highlight some of the hosts of those symbiotes. And when figuring out the best way to do this, we basically have two options. We can go in the chronological order based on the date of their first appearance, or we can go in chronological order based on where in the timeline of the Marvel Universe they appeared. And I think the second option will make the most sense as we progress throughout the symbiotes. And so that's what we're going to do. That means that we need to start with the very beginning of the history of the symbiotes. And because that history has been retconned relatively recently, that means we're going to go with one of the most recent characters to be introduced, Knull, the god of the symbiotes. So for all the guys who are a little bit behind here, Knull was created by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman and first appeared in Venom number 3 in 2008, with his origin being revealed in the very next issue. So Knull is older than the Marvel Universe itself, existing in a dormant state until he was awakened by the Celestials when they began creating the current iteration of the Marvel Universe. Now angered that the Celestials were filling the void that he'd ruled, Knull creates All Black the Necro Sword and slays one of the Celestials with it, a crime for which he's banished back to the void. Now Knull uses this opportunity to grow more formidable, strengthening the All Black sword in a forge that was made from the head of the dead Celestial. All Black, we would later learn, was the prototype of the race that would become the symbiotes as we know them, and the fire of the forge and the sound of Knull's hammer would instill in all future symbiotes vulnerabilities in both fire and sound. Now Knull goes on a murderous rampage across the universe, destroying billions of solar systems in the process until he's stopped by Gore the God Butcher, who defeats Knull and takes All Black from him. Now in the century following his defeat, Knull figured out that he could actually bond his living abyss with lesser creatures and control them across galaxies, thereby creating the first true symbiotes. Now in terms of power, Knull definitely lives up to his name as God of the symbiotes because he's godlike in his power. His primary ability is that he can create weapons and other symbiotes using the living abyss. Not only is he capable of creating literal armies of symbiotes, but he can also control them through a telepathic link that he shares with them. In addition to this, he's immortal and possesses superhuman strength and durability to the point of being practically invulnerable. And the thing about Knull's powers is this: I would wager that we haven't even come close to seeing the limits of what he can do. I mean, in the most recent issue, we saw him ensnare Celestials into his bidding, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so I imagine that we're probably going to see Knull display some ridiculous abilities that we didn't even know that he had. Now, one of the first symbiotes that Knull created was the Grendel, which was also created by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman and first appeared in Venom number 4. Now, Grendel was one of several symbiotes that took the form of a dragon, and it was while piloting the Grendel symbiote that Knull first learned of Earth. Now, as Grendel attacked a village, the villagers cried out for their hero Beowulf, but were instead answered by Thor. Now, Thor strikes Grendel with a bolt of lightning, which severs Knull's control over his symbiotes, and his vulnerability to electricity would continue to be a trait of symbiotes long into the future. The resulting symbiotes began seeking out new hosts, reproducing and rebelling against Knull, which is how the race of symbiotes created by Knull became the Klyntar, which we learn is their race's word for cage and imprison their deity. Now, the Grendel symbiote possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, which are powers that are common to symbiotes, but Grendel's powers are of a much higher scale than most symbiotes due to him having such a close connection with its creator, Knull. Now, the Grendel symbiote is also able to generate other symbiotes and is also able to reanimate corpses by bonding them to its offspring. Of course, the most popular symbiote and the one introduced to the Marvel Universe is Venom. The version of Venom most are familiar with was created by David Michelinie and Todd McFarlane and first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988, but his origins in the Marvel Universe go back much further than that. The symbiote that would become known as Venom was part of the 998th generation of symbiote offspring and was cast out from the rest of the symbiotes for being mentally insane before being obtained by the Kree, who hoped to harness its shape-shifting abilities in their war with the Skrulls. Now, the symbiote was bonded to a Kree warrior named Tel-Kar, but was eventually separated from him and returned to the Kree homeworld before somehow making its way to Battleworld, which leads us to the symbiote's original origin story as told in Secret Wars number 8 by Jim Shooter and Mike Zeck. Now, in that issue of Secret Wars, which I have the whole story covered, you can find a link to it down in the description, in the ensuing chaos, Spider-Man's costume gets ripped up, but luckily the heroes find a machine that can create any clothing that they want. Spider-Man, however, chooses the wrong machine and is covered by a black goo that becomes his new costume. Kind of a fun fact here, in Deadpool's Secret War, Marvel actually changed that so that Deadpool was on Battleworld, which we didn't know about, and he actually directed Spider-Man to the machine itself, not realizing that it actually had a Venom symbiote in it, and that's how Peter Parker basically became the new Venom. Right? It's kind of a small, fun little retcon. The story's really good if you guys ever get a chance. It's a really fun story. But regardless, Spider-Man wears this costume for a while, but then he begins to realize that it was trying to bond to him permanently, and so he leaves it with the Fantastic Four, who believe that they have the symbiote contained. Of course, they don't, and the symbiote escapes and bonds to Peter once again, but Parker still rejected it by exploiting its weakness to Sonic's and ringing church bells to drive it away. Now, a disgraced reporter named Eddie Brock would then wander into the church seeking some sense of direction in his life. The discarded Venom symbiote could tell that Eddie harbored hatred for Peter Parker, who he blamed for his professional downfall, and so the symbiote bonded with Eddie, turning him into Venom. And Brock and the symbiote joined together in their common mission to get revenge on Peter Parker. Now, Venom's powers include superhuman strength and durability, as well as shapeshifting, including the ability to disguise itself by replicating the appearance of normal street clothes. Now, because it's bonded with Spider-Man, the Venom symbiote has inherited his superpowers, such as the ability to produce and swing from webs, and is also immune to Peter Parker's spider sense. But Eddie is not the last host of the Venom symbiote, and in fact, the symbiote has bonded with several other individuals. And I guess I'm already going out of order here in terms of chronology, but since these are all hosts of the Venom symbiote, I figured we'd go ahead and discuss them all here anyway. Kind of makes the most sense. So, after the Venom symbiote was separated from Eddie, it approached another of Spider-Man's perennial foes, the Scorpion, Mac Gargan. And so what happens is that Norman Osborn had been imprisoned and needed Spider-Man to break him out, which of course Spider-Man would never do, except that under Norman Osborn's orders, Scorpion had kidnapped Aunt May and would only free her if Spider-Man helped break Norman out of jail, which makes sense. Now, during the conversation where Mac explains this arrangement to Peter, Peter makes the remark that Scorpion will always be a B-list villain, specifically saying, "It's not like your Venom." But when Mac goes home, the Venom symbiote is waiting for him and offers to bond with him, telling him that on his own, he'll always be a joke. But if he bonds with a symbiote, no one will ever laugh at him again. Obviously, Scorpion takes him up on this offer, or he wouldn't be in this video, and he becomes Venom, which granted him all the same powers that Eddie Brock had as Venom until the symbiote was removed from Gargan after he was arrested for his antics as one of the Dark Avengers during the Dark Reign story. Now, another of Venom's notable hosts was Flash Thompson, a sometimes rival and sometimes friend of Peter Parker, who lost his legs in a heroic sacrifice during the Iraq War. Now, with the US government in possession of the Venom symbiote at the time, and the Amazing Spider-Man number 654 by Dan Slott, they approached Flash about participating in Project Rebirth 2.0. Now, why do they call it that? Because the program that turned Steve Rogers into Captain America was called Project Rebirth. And the cardinal rule of Marvel Comics is that every organization, without exception, wants to replicate the success of that original program and create their own super soldier. Now, Flash agrees and is bonded with the symbiote, turning him into Agent Venom, which grants him all the powers of his favorite hero, Spider-Man, as well as Venom's shape-shifting abilities. And of specific significance to Flash, the Venom symbiote would also allow him to walk again, and he would remain bonded to the Venom symbiote from 2011 up until 2016, and so a pretty long time by modern comic standards. Something else to kind of note here, depending on who you talk to, a lot of people actually liked Agent Venom more than they liked Eddie Brock Venom. He was hugely popular when he first came out. People loved him. People loved the story of Agent Venom. I feel like we should cover it. Let me know down in the comments section if you guys want me to cover Agent Venom. I don't know if you guys want me to or not. I feel like it'd be kind of interesting. But before we get into the offspring of the Venom symbiote, something that I do want to point out here is that there are several more hosts of the Venom symbiote over the years in both the main Marvel continuity and even in alternate realities. For example, in the Old Man Logan universe, which basically imagines the Marvel universe as a desolate, post-apocalyptic wasteland, we see the Venom symbiote had actually bonded to a literal T-Rex in Wolverine number 69 by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven. Now, this version seems to basically be identical to the symbiote of the 616 universe, so we can assume that this Venomous Rex, Venomsaurus Rex, I like Venomous Rex, just has the normal Venom powers and abilities. On Earth 65, the numerical designation of the universe where Gwen Stacy became Spider-Gwen, there is a version of Venom that was created by a scientist named Elsa Brock in an attempt to find a cure for the lizard formula that had turned that universe's Peter Parker into the lizard. First appearing in Spider-Gwen number 19 by Jason Latour and Robbie Rodriguez, the Venom of Earth 65 is not an alien symbiote, but is artificially created by a reaction between the radioactive spider isotopes that gave Gwen her superpowers and the lizard formula. Now, Gwen would later bond with the symbiote to become Gwenom in Spider-Gwen number 24. The Venom symbiote grants its wearer all the powers that Spider-Gwen had, which are essentially the same as the Spider-Man of Earth 616, but it also must have a compatible host, as it will kill incompatible ones through the radiation from the spider isotopes. Furthermore, the symbiote makes its wearer subject to overly aggressive behavior by removing their inhibitions and amplifying their emotions. And so this version of the symbiote also retains the weaknesses to heat and sonics of the main universe Venom. Now, moving on to the offspring of Venom, the first and most prominent is of course Carnage, which was created by David Michelinie and Mark Bagley and first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in 1992. Now, the Carnage symbiote was created when Eddie Brock, who was bonded with the Venom symbiote at the time, escaped from prison, and unbeknownst to Eddie, left an offspring behind that would bond with his cellmate, a maniacal serial killer named Cletus Cassidy. Now, Cassidy would be the most frequent host of the Carnage symbiote, whose abilities differ significantly from the Venom symbiote because Carnage was born into an environment alien to its species, the environment of Earth. And so the Carnage symbiote's strength surpasses that of Venom, and it also possesses advanced shapeshifting abilities, allowing its host to turn appendages into weapons and can even fire projectile weapons made of the symbiote itself. The symbiote's tendrils can implant thoughts in the minds of others and can also relay information it perceives from any direction to its host instantaneously. The symbiote grants its host a regenerative healing factor and, like Venom, is undetectable by Peter Parker's spider sense, and it's highly adaptive to its environment, for example, evolving to allow its host to breathe in space. Now, when the codex, or the genetic imprint of the Carnage symbiote, reacted with the Grendel symbiote when it reanimated Cletus Cassidy's corpse, the result was a far more powerful entity than Carnage had ever been before, and it also gained the ability to create brain worms, which it can use to infect others and turn them into copies of Carnage. Now, in the 1993 miniseries Venom Lethal Protector by David Michelinie, Mark Bagley, and Ron Lim, we see the introduction of 5 more symbiotes: Scream, Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony. Now, the story here centers around a group called the Life Foundation, dedicated to ensuring the survival of the country's wealthiest citizens in the event of an apocalypse-type event. Now, when Venom interferes with one of their plans, they extract part of the Venom symbiote and choose 5 of the Life Foundation security guards. These 5 symbiotes seem to have basically the same powers as Venom, but also seem to be slightly less powerful. Eventually, Scream murders her 4 siblings, but only the host dies while the other symbiotes are taken to the Vault Super Prison and merge into one symbiote known as Hybrid, and Venom Along Came a Spider number 1 by Larry Hama and Joe St. Pierre. Now, the symbiotes were subjected to extremely painful experiments, and once Vault Guard Scott Washington discovers this, he releases them from their confinement and all 4 bond with him. Now, due to the experimentation by the government, these symbiotes gain some unique abilities, such as heightened senses in the case of Phage, Lasher's ability to bond with animals, Riot's ability to move faster than the naked eye can detect, and Agony's ability to increase its host musculature and spit acid. And so when Scott Washington became Hybrid, he gained all of these powers as well as the standard symbiote powers. But Venom is not the only symbiote to produce offspring, as Carnage has produced some itself, the first of which is Toxin. So Toxin was created by Peter Milligan and Clayton Crane and first appeared in Venom Carnage number 2 in 2004. Now, when Carnage found out that he was about to reproduce, he began fostering a deep-seated hatred for his eventual offspring, fearing that it may become more powerful than himself, and so he decides to kill it as soon as it's born. Now, Venom tries to talk him out of this. Of course, it doesn't work because Carnage is insane. So Venom tries to protect the new symbiote, as he also fears that it will be the symbiote that may become unstable due to being the 1000th generation of their race. And so to hide the symbiote from Venom, Carnage gives birth to it and then bonds it with a New York City police officer named Patrick Mulligan and attempts to kill both of them. But of course, he's stopped by Venom. Now, once Venom realizes how strong the Toxin symbiote will become, he decides Carnage is right and helps him try to kill it. But Toxin is aided in battle by Spider-Man when they defeat Venom and Carnage. Now, Toxin has all the Venom and Carnage abilities and is physically stronger than either of them, and also possesses an ability to track any other individual, an expansion of the ability that most symbiotes have to track other symbiotes or their hosts. Now, the next symbiote that we're introduced to is actually not a true symbiote, but is part of a race known as the Variants, which are a genetically similar offshoot to the Klyntar race. Now, Trent, who is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., is approached by a symbiote called Payback that had previously bonded to his father. The Payback symbiote differed from the Venom symbiote and its progeny in a variety of ways. First, it fed off the bliss of its host and was more of an entity made of energy instead of organic matter. In addition to enhanced physical attributes and a healing factor, the Payback symbiote allows its host to fly and project electromagnetic energy. Of course, being pure energy, the Payback symbiote has a vulnerability to water, and coming into contact with water will result in accidental expulsions of electricity. Next up, we have Anti-Venom, created by Dan Slott and John Romita Jr., and making his debut in Amazing Spider-Man number 569 in 2008. Now, Eddie Brock is working at a soup kitchen run by Martin Lee, the supervillain known as Mr. Negative. Lee cures Eddie of his cancer using his ability to control light force energy, and shortly thereafter, Eddie is attacked by Matt Gargan, who was bonded to Venom at the time. The Venom symbiote tries to rebond with Eddie, but touching Eddie's skin harms Venom, and parts of the symbiote merge with the antibodies created by the light force energy to create a wholly new symbiote known as Anti-Venom. Now, the Anti-Venom symbiote has all the abilities of Venom, but does not possess its weaknesses to sound and fire. The symbiote is able to heal others from a variety of afflictions through its ability to produce antibodies, but using this ability drains Anti-Venom's powers. Furthermore, Anti-Venom does display a weakness to dark force energy, which is the dark counterpart to the light force energy that led to its creation. Now, this brings us to a weird one, the mutant symbiote known as Zzzx. It's literally Zzzxx. I don't know how to pronounce that. Zzzx? I have no idea. We're just going to call it Z. Created by Chris Yost and Dustin Weaver, Z first appeared in X-Men Kingbreaker number 2 in 2009. Now, Z was a symbiote discovered by the Shi'ar Empire, unlike any they had ever seen before, as it actually fed on the brains of its host. Now, Z was locked away for years as one of the 5 most dangerous criminals the Shi'ar had ever encountered. But Vulcan, the brother of Scott and Alex Summers, chose Z to be part of his Imperial Guard and bonded him to a Shi'ar soldier before bonding to the Starjammer Raza Longknife and eventually the Cancerverse version of Charles Xavier, which was basically just a giant brain for Z to feed on, is really all it was. Other than the bit about eating the brains of its host, Z seems to have pretty much the same powers as other symbiotes. Then we have the second offspring of Carnage, which is known as Scorn, which was created by Zeb Wells and Clayton Crane and first appeared in Carnage number 4 in 2011. And so at this point, Carnage was ripped in half by the Sentry and left to float through the endlessness of space, but it actually survived the experience and returned to Earth. Now, a man named Michael Hall discovers Carnage and tries to use it to create artificial limbs, but when a doctor named Tanis Neves loses his arm, she gets one of these prosthetics to replace it, and as you may have guessed, the results are disastrous as she's unable to control the symbiote, which kills several people as it bonds to her. Now, when the Carnage symbiote finds Cletus Cassidy, it leaves Tanis, but leaves behind an offspring that bonds with Tanis, turning her into Scorn, a hybrid symbiote cyborg. Now, the main distinction between Scorn and other symbiotes is that she can bond herself to technology due to her techno-organic physiology. She's also able to communicate with and control various types of technology and can change herself into any form of technology that she comes into contact with. Now, Carnage's offspring do not stop there, however, as during Jerry Conway's run on Carnage in 2016, an FBI agent named Claire Dixon is captured by Carnage and used in a ritual whereby he tries to bolster his power using a book called the Darkhold. The result is that Claire is turned into a symbiote known as Reyes, who seems to have no powers beyond those common to all symbiotes. And finally, we come to Sleeper. Now, Sleeper was created by Mike Costa and Mark Bagley and first appeared in Venom number 165 in 2018, the final issue of Venom before the current Donny Cates run began. Now, Claire Dixon, who we just discussed, was thought to be dead, but as it turns out, due to her exposure to the Darkhold, she couldn't actually die. Anyway, she captures Eddie Brock and tells him that the Venom symbiote is about to give birth. Eddie escapes and finds a doctor to help deliver the spawn, a process that's difficult for the Venom symbiote, and despite an attempt by Scorpion to steal the spawn as it was born, it's successfully delivered and kept in the care of Alchemax. Now, this offspring would become known as Sleeper and was stolen by Tel-Kar, the first host of Venom, after the Venom symbiote refused to bond with him once more. And so before Tel-Kar could bond with Sleeper, the symbiote bonded with Eddie. Now, Sleeper would later lobotomize Tel-Kar and use his body to explore space, where he learned about Knull and came back to Earth to protect Eddie and his son Dylan. Now, in addition to the normal symbiote powers, Sleeper has displayed an ability to become invisible and to produce a variety of chemicals and pheromones to produce a wide variety of effects, including manipulating the thoughts and emotions of others. And so that's pretty much the most major symbiotes in the Marvel Universe. I'm not going to say all, because there may have been a couple that slipped through the cracks. I don't think they are. I think for the most part, we pretty much caught them all, but I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments if I did forget a few. So, but with that being said, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.